Well, folks, welcome to Rimshots with Sean, an offshoot of Barstools and Bandtalk. I have a very special guest that I met through following her show. We have the wonderfully talented Kelly Barrett, all the way from not Winnipeg, but Lethbridge, Alberta. And Kelly, I'm just so that I don't mess it up. You host a show out there that's wildly successful, and you do it live, which is not what we do. Why don't you tell our viewers about your show?
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Sean. First of all, it's great to be here. It's kind of different being on the other side of the questions, so I'm really looking forward to this. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. So yeah, it's set on the Vibe Live. Most people are kind of curious to know how the show came to be, and the odd thing about this show, Sean, is that it's normally the way things work is, you work really hard and then you get to the finished prize or the show or whatever it is that you're going to do. And for me, it was really quite different because I kind of fluked into the show and then the hard work has come after. And so I'm a musician myself. I've got a background in, rock music. I was on the road with a rock band for 23 years. And right around the time that COVID hit, a good friend of mine who had a show here in Lethbridge on one of the local TV stations, a gentleman by the name of Brent Cutforth, he had a show called DJB Feel the Beat. And, everybody's bored trying to find stuff to do. And Brent asked me if I would co-host the show with him. Of course, I jumped at the chance, right up my alley. And so one of the things was that you had to bring your own guest on. And so, fortunately, I kind of knew a couple of people that were fairly well known in the industry that I could call upon. And so I reached out to my good friend, Mark Gladstone, who is the keyboard player from Prism, and his lovely wife, Cheryl Jardine, and they have a band also called Stone Poets, and they came on the show. And the station was, I think, impressed that Mark and his wife had come on the show. And I was really, really nervous. And so I went on and I thought, well, this would be a fun little way to spend an afternoon. And so I co-hosted with my friend Brent. And an hour after the show aired, the station manager called me up and said, "You need to have your own show." And I didn't know anything about it. I had never done it before, but I was all over it. I jumped all over it. How does this work? When do I start? And so I really fluked into it. And so so the work kind of came after.
It's interesting because Barstools more or less started the same way. I was doing a show on community radio, a sports show, and there was no sports going on. So, hey, I'll go back to my roots and I'll interview some of my musician buddies. And I thought it was going to be, a 2 to 5 week thing. And here I am almost two years later. Question that I have, I know the answer for me. You're lining up guests. How have you found it in terms of, when you put the asks out? How's it been lining people up? Are you finding it hard? Are you finding it difficult?
Sean, I've been really, really lucky that way. I think it might have been a little more of an effort in the beginning, just because I hadn't done a lot of shows, and I don't know. People have been really, really gracious. And then of course, and you probably know this, as the shows went on, and I'll just backtrack a little bit because, when I was with Just TV, I was just doing local people.
Yep. So
when I was offered that show, the idea was that it was going to be local people. And so the station would have a say in who the guests were going to be. And then incidentally, I ended up having creative differences with the station manager as far as quality goes. And, they had their system that they used, and in my mind, it wasn't quality. And so I had to make a decision. And so very early on in the game, and I knew I might be shooting myself in the foot, but I left this very well-known TV station and completely went off on my own, with the intention of just having complete creative control. And that meant the quality, that we were discussing before the show, the right streaming platform. I can't have people's faces melting in the middle of a show.
Right.
And so I left so I could have complete creative control. And which I do, as well as you do, with everything right down to the set of et cetera. It's actually Gotham City is the backdrop of that. But I just wanted to be responsible for all of it. And that way, the responsibility falls on me, success falls on me, but also failure falls on me too. But I really wanted that because I just wanted to, to be in charge of it all. And so in answer to your question, now I'm on my own to find guests, but now the COVID has shut everything down. And so that was when I got the idea, well, if I'm doing it remotely, why don't I go big and try and get some of these, the people that I grew up idolizing and the people that were my mentors, why don't I just reach out? And because I knew a couple of, well-known people in a few bands, that's kind of how I started. And it's really gotten easier because I think as your list of guests that you've had on grows, then you can now approach bigger ticket stars and, there's however you want to, artists, and say, hey, how would you like to, this is my show and this is who I've had on before. And so I think it really becomes, for example, when I got Colin James on, it's like, well, if Miles Goodwin just did it, why wouldn't I? Or, it's kind of like a domino effect. It's like as the guest list grows, it becomes easier to then sell it.
Well, and kudos on you for Miles, because I mean, Miles lives 45 minutes and he hasn't come on our show yet, but he was at a show that I did. Well, long story, but you know what? Miles is a good fella. Grew up just down the road from Dartmouth where I live. He was at a show that my band opened for Haywire, and Miles was out. I think it was the Friday night or the Saturday night that we played. We didn't know he was there, and we did Roller, and somebody comes up, Miles is here, and it's like, uh-oh. And he came up and he said, great job. And he was very, very courteous. So one of the things that we found and what I was kind of hoping this is how it was going to be, but what you're telling me is an awful lot of what we experienced. We started local, and what we found, and I mentioned to you before we started, Darby was the first one that we got on that kind of broke us beyond the borders of Atlantic Canada.
Right.
We had some people that were local here that wouldn't come on the show. And now they're asking us to come on the show, and I'm going, okay, well, you were in, we got a place here called Ecum-Secum. You're from Ecum-Secum. You're giving me a hard time, yet Darby Mills is coming on, and Lee Aaron's coming on. And right. So it's kind of like, hey, I'll bring you on the show, but just remember, and so that's what we experienced. Did you experience some of that at the beginning?
No, not at all. I experienced quite the opposite. Because I started out doing local, some local friends of mine, and there's so much talent in Lethbridge. There's I have a couple of friends that are recording artists that just both have new albums out. Steve Keenan being one of them, who was one of my first guests on the show. And he is like Colin James quality. He really is, he's going to go someplace. And I have another friend, Tyrants of Chaos, who are a heavy metal band, stadium quality band. So I was able to get these local guests on, but it moved so quickly to me going off on my own and then, reaching to the, bigger, well-known recording artists that I experienced that. My sense was that some of the local musicians were a little annoyed with me. There would be the odd comment on the local music pages. Well, she's only interested in the people from the West Coast and not her own hometown people. And so what are you going to do though? Right. And the show was called Canadian Icons and I try and keep it like that, but there's much talent. And so that was kind of more my, but the local musicians are so supportive of the show. They are so supportive.
So you do what we did, Kelly, and basically it was, hey, we'll have you on. But remember when we asked you 2 months ago and you said that you didn't want to, no problem, right. We'll have you on. We've never been a closed club. We've had people in the hip hop and rap genre, which my son is in. We've had people in country, blues, jazz. My background's, Sirius XM hair metal, man. That's my channel, right? But we'll have everybody on there. But one of the things that we found, and Darby was on there, she gave us instant cred. It's the people that watch our show that suggest the guests, which is kind of cool. And one that really put us on the map was a friend of mine said, geez, if you could get Todd Zuckerman, the drummer from Styx, that'd be awesome. So a friend of mine sent Todd an email and he came back. Yeah, no problem. And he couldn't have been a nicer guy.
Isn't that seems to be the way they are. Like I honestly, and I will add this since you're asking about guests. I do have two connections. One on the East Coast, a gentleman by the name of Eric Alper.
Okay.
Who's a really good connection. I mean, the guy has represented like Bob Geldof, Ringo Starr, Sinead O'Connor. And then I also have a West Coast connection, of course, with Bernie Aubin, who was the drummer for the Headpins and also the president of Canadian Classic Talent. So I will go to them the very odd time, but I would say truthfully that probably 85% of my guests are just done on my own. And you're right, they're gracious. I haven't really had anybody say no. Oh, Anne Murray said no.
That's fine.
And I did a survey. I put out like, who do you guys want to see on my show? And all these requests came in, and I've gotten a few of them. And one of them was Anne Murray, and so I tried to get her, and I got a very polite, bit hard no.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll tell you what. You're going to get that. Cat's out of the bag outside of some of the local guys who I won't name. I'm not going to name. But we asked South Jordan, and she said no. And I think it was because she had nothing on the go at the time. Right. And then about 6 or 7 months later, got a note to say, hey, she's doing media. And it was like, we were just booked solid. So it was kind of like, it wasn't an on purpose thing. It does happen. And I guess I'm going to say, when I'm doing this, I don't take it personally. But when I'm off camera, I'm kicking stuff around and throwing stuff because I do take it personally, right? You know what I mean?
Right? How can you not? In the beginning, and then I have to look back when I invited Anne Murray on. I hadn't really done a ton of shows, and but I remember thinking, and I'll be honest, I felt offended, right? But when I look back now, she just wasn't. She had no new album out. She wasn't. It wasn't that she just wasn't doing the Kelly Barrett. She just wasn't doing anything.
Yep, that's fair. Well, and I mean, it's funny because when we had Darby on, and the COVID thing was on, and I can still remember she's like, yeah, this is going to be better than the last one I did because it was I did an interview with two guys in their mother's basement, and Dave's living in his mother's house and I'm in a basement, and he's experimenting with green screen and his head's disappearing, and it's kind of like, but we chatted with Darby for 3 hours. She was so cool. And I that's just one of the things that I think she was the one where, hey, if she's going to do it and this guy's not, who cares? I talked to Darby Mills and she's cool. So you don't want to hang out with me? I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Yeah, there's Darby is very cool. I've had her on too, and she was just an amazing guest. And I find all of the Canadian guests, they're so gracious. They're happy to come on. They're they don't ever. I've never been made to feel like my little show and I'm here and I'll do your little show kind of thing. They're always just gracious and grateful for the opportunity. And I think, and you may feel this way too, Sean, but I really felt that the whole COVID situation might have almost worked in my favor starting. Yep. Because, people were bored, yep. People were not doing anything. So
no question. And I mean, we had some neat things happen. Like, for example, Holly Woods, I mean, she was way, 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 way down low. And we asked her national. She finally came in. It was one of my favorite interviews. She was just, she was sitting there and she's got the little Southern accent. She's living in North Carolina and she was awesome. And I'll tell you a great story about her. I've got to know her really well. And one of her idols, Mary Wilson, had passed away. And Holly put a very, very nice post about it was her idol. I was getting ready to go into the shower. And instead of hitting the care emoji, I hit the thumbs up. Didn't even notice. I get out and I get this text from Holly. I can't believe you. Anyway, I was like, I'm so sorry. And she goes, I knew you weren't. Yeah. She goes, I knew that wasn't you. And anyway, I'm sitting there going, this is pretty cool. Somebody like Holly Woods is worried about me embarrassing myself. And I was just like, wow, that was pretty cool. And nicest lady. And you had Barry on, right? You had Barry on your show? Barry Connors?
From Toronto?
Yeah.
Barry Connors? I sure did. He's such a wacky, crazy. I love Barry.
So I had Barry and Daryl Miller on. I had Barry almost 2 years ago. The two of them, it was the first time in 4 years that they'd actually talked to one another. And wow. It was great. And, Barry's one of those guys. When I interviewed him 2 years ago, the first crack he made was, Barry, go on YouTube and I see these guys playing Your Daddy Don't Know and they suck. So I'm in a band that does that song. So every time that we play it, I'm thinking like, hopefully nobody's got a camera, right? And so anyway, we did it. And the first thing I said to Barry was, yeah, Barry, remember when you said that? And he's like, I'm going to tell you something right now. I've seen you play. You're great. And Barry's, the big burly voice and stuff. And anyway, it's so cool to meet folks like that, right?
For sure it is. For sure. Actually, funny you should mention Daryl Miller is coming on this Sunday.
Daryl is awesome.
That's what I hear.
I got connected through a friend of mine who's a drummer in Toronto, and not the drummer in Toronto, that would be Barry, but a drummer in Toronto. And Daryl's been on once by himself and once with Barry. And the week that I interviewed him, he was going to the Monsters of Rock cruise the next week. And I probably text Daryl, once or twice a week. He's just a super cool guy. And I said to him, it's really cool to meet somebody that I grew up idolizing, and I meet him on a personal level, and he's a good guy. He's not an asshole. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Have you ever, do you get nervous? Have you ever been nervous with a guest?
No, not at all. You know why? And I'll tell you why. I've never been a fanboy. I mean, like you, I had a long career in music, and I'm still playing it. And I had the opportunity to open for a lot of bands, and I got to see some really nice people, and I got to see some real idiots. And so it kind of gave me the whole 360 deal on it. So I don't get, I don't get too worked up. And I had the opportunity to make an apology to Rick Emmett, who was something that I did 30 years ago when I opened for him. It wasn't anything serious. He didn't even remember it. So that was good. Anyway, but no, I don't get nervous. And there's only been one incident where we interviewed somebody where I was getting ready to just say, you know what, I'm shutting this down. And he kind of turned around. So no, I don't. I just, and the other thing too is, and no offense, Kelly, I'm like David Letterman. I don't do a lot of pre-preparation because I like this. I like the banter. I like the real stuff. Which is why I thought you lived in Winnipeg. So I do apologize for that.
All good.
Yeah. So you've been doing it how long now on your own? Like, and you're up to about how many, I guess we'll call them episodes or segments.
It's funny you should mention that, Sean, because, Facebook will pop up memories. And then it popped up one today. It was 1 year ago this Sunday that Lee Aaron was on the show. And I know she was one of my first when I went off after I had got off on my own. So I want to say probably about a year and a half worth of shows.
Nice.
Every Sunday, yeah. The show was every Sunday. And oddly enough, Lee Aaron was the one guest that for some, I grew up idolizing her, and she was one of the women that made me, want to get into the business. And she was a mentor to me. And so, I'm all excited before the show, and and then about 15 minutes before airtime, I almost had like a little mini panic attack for some odd reason. And I'm not a nervous, anxiety-ridden person, and it wasn't because I thought she'd be a tough guest. It was because it was like, holy frick, it's Lee Aaron, and I had just been such a fan, and I had never met her in person before. And she couldn't have been a bigger sweetheart, and just, she's an absolute angel. And so, within about 30 seconds, I just felt like I was talking to a girlfriend that I had grown up with. And then she came back a couple of months later when her new album came out, and she's just lovely. Yeah, no, she's great. And when we had her on the show, she did a tour of her husband's record collection, which was just insane. And another, I guess I had opened for her a number of years ago, but a friend of mine had been playing keyboards with her before he moved back to Halifax. So I had a lot of little touch points and stuff, and it was a really good interview and a real smooth interview. You hit something there about Lee and about getting nervous. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to say, hey, this is the end of this segment for now. We want to come back and follow up on that if you're good. I'm good.
All right, folks. Rimshots with Sean. We'll see you soon.